Well, yes, indeed, we're focusing on that presidential committee. Remember when they spoke about financial autonomy for states, legislatures, and judiciary. Now, the president believes that this will strengthen democracy and deepen inclusiveness of citizens. So, while he was receiving that particular report on that presidential implementation committee on financial autonomy of state legislatures and judiciary, he said the government will study its recommendations and take appropriate decisions. Let me quote from that particular statement. So, because there was a statement that was released by the presidential spokesman, Mr. Femi Adesina, who says, quote, "I went through a terrible time getting here. For the 3 times I contested elections, that's why I want to stabilize the system so that others will not pass through the same experience. Both young and ordinary Nigerians depend on leadership to ensure justice is always done. So we must ensure that trust is not compromised." End of quote. Apologies, you couldn't see that particular quote of the president. Do remember that the committee was set up in March of 2019, that's this year, to recommend ways of application, operations, and observance of the relevant sections of the Constitution. Well, the Attorney General eventually quoted sections of the Constitution and what they were expected to do. So today we've got 2 gentlemen in the studios to shed some light. We'll have another join us much later. Professor Tahir Maman, OON, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. He's a former Director General, Nigerian Law School. He joins us from our studios in Abuja. And then we also have Mr. Monday Ubani, former Second Vice President of the NBA, here in our studios in Lagos. Thank you for coming on today as well.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning.
Well, let's get to Professor Maman in Abuja. Prof, let's start with you on this particular one. So one will imagine, former DG in Nigeria Law School, you've been, a lot about this. Give us your impression first, because I know that they've talked about judicial reform several times, but how to implement some of these things may be a challenge which may not happen. But okay, I'm afraid we can't get to Prof at the moment, but Mr. Bani, the lot falls on you then. Well, I know that, is this a good thing in the first place?
Yes, one of those good news, we keep on hearing these days, in Nigeria, that we are trying to do the right thing, strengthening our institutions. While I was in secondary school, I learned a bit of separation of powers. I did government. And then I learned about operational autonomy. I also know that there should not be interference by any of the arms against each other. And then one of the fundamentals, deals with the issue of financial independence of those arms in order to govern effectively. Efficiency in the system is very key. But when we came to the real operation, we discovered that those things are not there. Issue of financial autonomy for the judiciary, especially at the state level, and that of the legislature, they are not there. And that's why we are where we are today. We are not operating at optimal level. The efficiency level is not there. So when you begin to hear reports like that the government has now tried to do the right thing, this is those things that are fundamentals that must be inbuilt in a system for efficiency, then what we do is to clap for them. So I'm happy, hearing that a committee was set up and the committee brought that report of how to actually, they recommended a uniform application of those issue of autonomy at all the levels, all the state level, throughout the entire federation. So uniformity on operation of the issue of financial autonomy.
Because I'm just wondering, because if we have to take 1 step forward, we mustn't be taking another 2 steps backwards. That's the law of progression. Yes. But we have a constitution, and it's very clear in section 121 of, that has to do with the autonomosity of states and what it means for local governments as well. Was it right in the first place? Did you expect that there would have been a committee that is set up when you have a law the Constitution clearly spells out what it should be. Is that not taking a step forward and taking two steps backwards again?
Yeah, very important question. Ordinarily, is a constitutional provision. There was an amendment actually, I think in 2018, they call it the fourth alteration, where this issue of financial autonomy of the judiciary was enacted. And states have been finding it difficult to implement them. If you look at some of the reports we've had in the past, the judicial staff have always been going on strike. And what are they asking for? Give us financial autonomy. It's there in the Constitution, so we see no reason why the judiciary should be going cap in hand, bringing the executive. Ordinarily, we know that all arms of government are supposed to be independent. You are not going to go to the executive who now behaves as if he's dispensing to you a favor. He's giving you his own personal money, whereas the Constitution provides first-line charge on the consolidated revenue for all the three arms of government. So it is this lack of implementation that will make a government say, look, what is going on? Even like the issue of local government, which we came here to discuss. They are supposed to have money meant for the local government go directly into the account. But along the line, being used for the local government administration, along the line, somebody hijacked the money and then now give them a stipend to go and pay salary. And that's why we have not been having good governance.
So are we facing the real issues?
Yes.
Because in this instance, and in the instance of the local government, if we are not facing the true causes of this, we just are merely chasing shadows. What must we do? What can the government do? Is the only option setting up committees to come up with reports that may not even see the light of the day or even hardly get implemented, and then still keeping us in the same spot that we started?
I don't think the government is, doesn't mean well in setting up the committee and say they will not in any way implement the report. What the government has done is, so look, can you recommend, so it's even better, let's have a uniform operation. Because all the while, some states will operate autonomy, financial autonomy, some will not. But let's now have it as a uniform, a recommendation that will be implementable by all the states. And that is what they have done. The committee now has made a recommendation on the modalities, on the modules of operation. So that so if it becomes implementable, no state now will give any excuse whatsoever, in implementing it, because there has been a pronouncement made by the government on its operation. So I think the government is serious, by setting up the committee and having the committee make this particular recommendation. What I think that they should do, after having made a recommendation, that the government now should issue a white paper how it should be, either by executive order, whatever, because it's a constitutional issue and it's already there. It's not as if there is no provision in the Constitution.
I think there is a problem.
What problem are you
Mr. Ubani, that needs to be addressed.
Yes.
From 1999 on to date. 121 sub 3 of the Constitution, just as you said, already says any amount standing to the credit of the judiciary in the consolidated revenue fund of the state shall be paid directly to the heads of the courts concerned.
That's right.
Going back to Gimba's issue, this is what the Constitution says. This is the law. Does that mean, this recommendation or this committee and its function, does it mean that the governors have been flouting the law for the past 20 years?
I think this particular section, 122,
121
rather,
sub 3.
I think is a new provision. Because there was this fourth alteration that was done recently in the amendment, because I remember that even in the third alteration, this particular suggestion was rejected by even the State House of Assembly, that the autonomy was meant for. I remember vividly. So it is this fourth alteration that was made recently. But I also know that over time, the judicial staff, of the various states have been going on strike, and they have been insisting on this issue of financial autonomy for the judiciary over time. Some states have implemented, some have not. So I think that what the federal government is doing, look, we must stop all that. If there is a constitutional provision, let's ensure that this constitutional provision is obeyed and respected.
Do we need the Constitution? Do we need a committee to be set up to obey the law? Do governors need that?
I think maybe you bring some of the state governors here in your program and ask them, do we need any committee? Why have they not been complying with the Constitution, with the laws of the land? There are so many laws in our law books that are not being obeyed, that are observed in breach. And that is not the right thing. I agree with you, it's not the right thing. But I don't think that the federal government has done anything wrong by now having a committee that has made recommendation and the publicity that is given to it, and the government now will come with a white paper now arguing that there should be a uniform application. So if any state government now disobeys, it then means that that state government does not mean well in the first place.
But if there was no guarantee in the first place, what guarantees can there be now?
The guarantee now is that it's now going to be made as a pronouncement. Look, you have to obey this particular constitutional provision. It is there in the law. The law is meant to be obeyed. And if 90% of the state government are obeying the law and 1% or 10% is not, then that means that the people in that state should hold the government accountable. Because I see no reason why this uniform provision that is being recommended, that will now become operational, that somebody now will wake up and say, I'm not going to obey it. So I think that the thing is that we must keep on engaging in serious advocacy and asking that agencies of government must respect the law. So I must commend the government, federal government, for doing this by setting up a committee who has come with recommendation, and publicity is now being given. So all the state government that have just been sworn in, all the state governors now, we now know that, look, this thing is serious. It's going to be implemented when the government comes out now with a.
Do you expect, for instance, that some of the states who do not have local government structures in place now, by way of saying a local government chairman being appointed or even elected, will this in any way have an impact on that?
Well, the local government we know is a third tier, but we're talking about the arms of government now. We have the executive, we have the legislature, we have the judiciary. Over time, these two other arms will go to the executive and begin to beg for their financial, their financials, in order for them to operate. And that's why you see some of them going to the state governors to go and even kneel down, because who controls the purse controls virtually everything. Who pays the piper, they take it home. And so there is lack of independence, and that has also made even the assemblies not to really carry out their function. Issue of checks and balances on the executive governors. We have issues with issue of good governance at the state level. We have issues of good governance at the local government level. Everyone pays attention at the federal. And that's why you see things are not working the way it's supposed to work. This issue of even insecurity we are talking about. Do you know that if the money that belongs to local government, goes directly to them, they also have to take care of security in the local government, because security is at the local government. Almost all the states, all of us are members of the local government. But now the money that's supposed to be given to the local government are not given to them. So that's why you have insecurity all over the place. Attention, the federal government is the one now doing the issue of securing the local government, securing the state. Whereas the money that's supposed to be used for local government to secure their very local government are not being given to them. The same thing with the state. So I think what is going on now is that government is trying to do the right thing. They started with this issue of NFIU directive, which is very good. They have started about the issue of state policing, which is also very, very good. We're now talking about financial autonomy for judiciary and also for the legislative assembly, so that we can have good governance. Because the overall objective is that people must feel the presence of government at every tier. And
now, why then have the governors in this instance have put up this strong resistance even to the NFIU's proposal? And hopefully a white paper will come out of that, we don't know. But the governor seems to be very adamant to allow the process of local government administration to function. Is there something missing? Are we missing it? Or is the local government not having that capacity to operate autonomously?
Well, if the Constitution has made a provision that this is what should be operational.
But some people have argued it's an obsolete constitution.
No, what I'm saying, if you look at even the demand, the attitude of Nigerians towards local government autonomy, 99% of Nigerians are insisting that the money that is meant for local government should be given to them in order to carry out their responsibility prescribed by the Constitution. Is there. And so if a state governor, because of the fact that they want to have access to local government money now, is now arguing otherwise, we, the populace, we, the electorate, we, Nigerians, we say, no, this is what the law says. There must be administration at the local government level, and the money that is meant for them must be given to them in order to carry out that. All of us also must watch them to ensure that whatever is given to them is utilized for administration of local government. All of us must be alert. And so what makes a governor more competent to handle local government money more than a local government chairman? There is nothing. They are all elected, which the Constitution has actually prescribed. But what they do, which I have come here to highlight, is that they keep on appointing caretaker committee chairman, who becomes like a stooge. to them, and whatever they tell them, they do. And this is why we should watch out. Because even this new law that is operational, I have discovered that some governors now are still intimidating this local government chairman and say, if you get the money, return back this certain percentage to us. Well, so they must watch them to make sure that this particular new directive is still is implementable.
What impacts will all of these have if they still don't conduct local government elections and funds go to local government persons, perhaps in this case, caretaker committee chairman or transition, whichever way it is? So if funds keep going to those people, what impact will any of these laws have made?
When we came here at that time, and the recommendation is that the Minister for Finance should, or the federal government should make a pronouncement. If any state government refuses, neglects, or fails to carry out issue of election of local government officials, the money that is supposed to go to that local government should not be made available. I mean, it's a constitutional provision. The Section 7 makes it mandatory that you must conduct election.
Let me bring you back to this now, about the financial autonomy of legislatures and state judiciary. Even if they eventually get this autonomy, I'm just wondering, because if the issues that some of the issues concerning judicial reform, I know that the NBA has talked about this for a while, but whether or not it has happened, it's why it hasn't happened remains a big issue. If we don't look at key things such as the way judges are appointed, and you give financial autonomy, what kind of results will we get?
It is not correct to say that the issue of recruitment process is not being looked into.
At the state level?
Even at the state level, some things have been done. I think the process.
Who appoints the state attorney generals?
It's still, is an executive thing. We have not amended the constitution.
So
to distinguish between
the governors
and the
I'm sorry. The governors appoint them.
Yeah, the AG is an appointee.
So, but you said that he who plays the piper dictates it too.
No, the AG is not part of the judiciary. It's an executive position. He is the chief law officer of the state. It's different from judiciary. Am I making sense?
Well, the thing about that is, no, back to the question. You haven't responded to the question, which is, if, assuming they grant financial autonomy, and they don't address the way judges are appointed. We've had lawyers here who have said, look, that is an issue. If an executive person appoints a judge or key persons in the judiciary, what do you expect? They'll be beholden to the person.
Yes, if you build strong institutions, one of the key elements of building strong institutions that will become efficient is to have the personnel that will run those institutions also to be the right persons. Because a bad person can come up and mess up that particular institution. So recruitment process is very key. I agree with you. But I think there was a time there was a review. If you want to be made a judge now, I think they usually publish it now. They publish your name so that if any person has an objection, he can raise it. Unlike before, where it was done in secrecy, where people like the essays, the chiefs, the imams, will recommend their children who may not even want to be at the bench, to be a judge. It's been going on over time, but people have been arguing that we must carry out a comprehensive reform, especially the recruitment process. Justice must not be dispensed by somebody who is unjust, because sitting on the fountain of justice to dispense it, if somebody is polluted, the entire system will be polluted. So it's important that the recruitment process is taken care of. That's why you see all these developed economies. They build strong institutions, they emphasize it, all the fundamentals are there. In the recruitment process also, before you become a president of a country, before you become a judge of the Supreme Court, they go back to history.
Do you think the office of the CGN should be employed? Yes. Do you think the office of the CGN should be an elective office?
It can be. It's done elsewhere. It can be, but in our own case, it's being appointed by way of appointment. Yes. The states, yes. Okay. Yes, it can be. It can be by way of election, but you have to amend the constitution in order to reflect that. So over time, it is the need of the people, the need of the environment that determines amendment of your law in order to reflect that need. If Nigerians wake up tomorrow and say we want all our judges to be elected, fine, it can go that way. But then we must debate it. We must look at the whys and wherefores, whether it is the right thing for us to do as a nation, whether we have come to that level where we now begin to elect our judges. But Nigerians have to determine, and you have to amend the constitution. For now, it is by appointment, but we must also be careful in the recruitment process. Who are we recruiting? Is the person fit and qualified to be a judge? Is the person's disposition, meant to be a judge? And all that. We must take all that into consideration. Not because somebody is a relation of a governor or one is then you now make him to be a judge, whether that disposition is not there. And that's why the entire system most of the time gets messed up. So build strong institutions, but also get the right persons to occupy that institution without messing it up.
Talking about building strong institutions, Barrister Ubani, over the past 20 years, given the kind of control governors have wielded and are wielding, and which informed this presidential committee that's trying to work this, is that an indication that we had or have weak institutions at the state levels? Or we have individuals that are too strong and dominant over the institutions?
What we have over time built is strong persons instead of institutions. Look at the issue of state house of assemblies. The responsibility is actually to appropriate, financials for the state, carry out checks and balances, on the state governor, and then do oversight function. But over time, the governors will be more interested who becomes the speaker and the leadership of the house. And you find out that at the end, even the issue that they're supposed to carry out, the responsibility that the state house of assembly is supposed to carry out, checkmate the governor, they are not doing it. Because of the fact that, one, they lack that autonomy, financial autonomy, they go cap in hand begging the governor to give them their money. And because the power of the purse is very... Yes.
Sorry, sir. This financial autonomy, is it something that's embedded in the office of the governor or in the Constitution?
It's in the Constitution.
If it is in the Constitution, yes, what is it that is keeping the legislators from enforcing the law that they are supposed to make?
Well, what is keeping them is what is keeping Nigerians from enforcing and obeying even the laws they have made. There are so many good laws we have in the country. As I said earlier, Nigeria is an enigma. It's a country you really sit down and study.
Doesn't that put a question mark on the quality of leaders that we have, that they are not able to do what they swear to do?
What do we come here every day to discuss? It's the issue of leadership. Because leadership is key. Get the kind of leadership you deserve, you desire. Then everything will fall in line. Everything rises and falls with leadership. The moment Nigeria gets it right with leadership at all the tiers, local government, the state and federal, Nigeria will run because Nigeria has all the resources to be one of the best countries in the world. But we lack, quality leadership that obeys the law. The law is there for us to obey and implement.
So what happens if the governors refuse to obey this same implementation of the...
Then if a governor refuses, it should know what to do. The people should know what to do. The governor should not be re-elected. But the governor should not be given that particular...
What you are indicating to us...
If the legislative assemblies become powerful enough and carry out their responsibility, if a governor refuses to obey the constitution, it's even a ground for you to be impeached.
But the governors have, from what you have told us, the governors have been refusing to obey the constitution.
Because of the fact that this issue, the fundamentals have not been put in place in getting these houses to be financially autonomous so that they can carry out their responsibility. Because if a governor refuses to obey the constitution, it's a ground for impeachment. But because they go back begging them to give me my due, they cannot do that.
If you proceed in this particular manner, and some people wonder, look, this may be half measure. Not that it's not a good initiative to take, but will it get the desired impact? Because if I appoint someone and you say you're giving them financial autonomy, you don't know the agreement I may have. I mean, they could be beholden. So how do we address that particular question?
Chamberlain, we cannot, because of, as I said earlier, the other day I came here, because of the fear in the bush, we felt as a hunter to go on hunting expedition.
That's what I'm asking. Isn't this half measure? Or wouldn't it be considered as such?
No, the fundamentals have been addressed.
What are the fundamentals?
As I said earlier, the recruitment process is key. You have mentioned it. I agree with you. But what are the ingredients of separation of power? Is that you must give them independence, including financial autonomy, and they are addressing that issue one after the other. So I think that we must address fundamentals for us as a nation. Fundamentals are key.
The fundamentals in politics. Yes. The fundamentals in politics starts from the primaries. Everybody knows that.
Okay, that's it.
How do we get it right at the primaries? Yeah. Because that seems to be the point at which every other thing follows. It is the fulcrum. You have a primaries, and you've got how do I call it now? You've got variables that play out. One of which is godfatherism. The second is the money purse. And those two seem to be the ones who control who comes out successful in the primaries. And as such, they are now answerable to some godfathers. The godfathers which will now control the state houses of assembly, even sometimes to the National Assembly. That means we are not, as a people, getting the full measure of what we ought to get from the judicial, or should I say, the democratic process.
Yeah, the question you've asked, I hope Nigerians are listening. When I went to election recently, in 2019, we know the problem we face even at the primaries. Most of them that were elected, were more or less selected. And that's why we're having problems. Most of them are still in court. Pre-election matters are, all in court. Somebody has been removed recently by pre-election. He was sworn into the house, and the court now ruled otherwise. So we must try to begin to build institutions. But in building those institutions, as we said earlier, the people that will occupy the institution is key. I know you guys are asking this question that during primaries, godfatherism plays a role. And when you get the wrong person, he will become also the wrong person that will operate the institution, including the judiciary, including the legislative assembly, including the executive. So that recruitment process is what we should sanitize. INEC is supposed to observe the primaries of political parties. Is it not true? Is there in the electoral law? But most times it is observed in breach. The issue, I agree with you, we cannot solve all the problems at the same time. But let's begin to address them one after the other. The fundamentals are key. Recruitment process, clothe all the institutions with all the necessary fundamentals. And what we're doing now, we're addressing the issue of financial autonomy, which is why I came here to discuss. And I say, if we do that, is another step in the right direction to ensure efficiency in the long run.